Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Interacting and De-Escalating Individual with Special Needs, a course for law enforcement. The presenters for this afternoon session are Officer Diane Dudziak. Please place any questions you may have for the presenters in the chat box, and they will be addressed at the end of the presentation.
As she mentioned, my name is Officer Dudziak, and I'm a law enforcement officer in Northeast Ohio. So generally the presentation is about an hour or 2 hours long, depending on what the department needs or whoever we're presenting to. But for this purpose, we'll just go through some of the content and just kind of what we do present to the officers, so that if you're interested, for whether it's your university department or your local department, you kind of know what we're offering and kind of where we're at. So originally for law enforcement, I heard of this because I was going to the CIT training myself, and I learned of a young man named Ethan Saylor. He's a young man with Down syndrome in Baltimore, 26 years old, and he was attending a movie with his aide. I believe she was 18 years old. She may have been new, I'm not sure, but they both attended the movie. He really enjoyed it. They went out to the lobby. She went out to get his car, or the car, and he stayed there. As she was gone, he went back in the theater, and the manager saw him. He called the mall police, because it was a mall movie theater, and asked them to come get him and tell him, he couldn't be in there because he did not pay for the movie ticket. They couldn't get him to pay because Ethan doesn't handle his own money. That's something you need to know about individuals with disabilities. They often have a payee or an aide that are with them. The officers went in. They were off duty. It's not clear in the articles I've read whether they were in uniform or not, but they had asked him to leave. He got defiant with them. They did not allow the aide to come in for whatever reason. They got into a struggle with Ethan. He was a short, stocky individual, so he was quite heavy as well. They did end up cuffing him with 3 handcuffs, because when someone's larger, you hook them with more handcuffs so that it's not too close to the back of their hands or the back of their body. But in the struggle, they all fell onto him and on his belly. And he ended up screaming, and the moviegoers were hearing this because they were all waiting to have the movie start as well. He ended up dying because they broke something in his neck when they all fell in the struggle. He was yelling out for his mom, and it was probably traumatic for everybody. So I heard this in my CIT course, and I immediately thought of my brother who has Down syndrome. And when he's not with us, this can easily happen because he's very defiant. And this is one of the traits of Down's kids. They can be very stubborn. So I heard it. The people presenting to us were people from the county DD board. And I thought it was great information, and I was ready to learn something from it and move on. After the presentation was over, I heard officers talking, and some of them were saying, what do they expect? What do they want us to do? Are we supposed to just, let this guy get a free movie? Or what are we supposed to do? Should we not put our hands on people? Do people just get rid of, not follow laws because they have a disability? So I heard the difference was that the officers felt that they were being asked to do something that was not possible, or that they didn't know how to put these things together. And then the people presenting thought they gave some really great information. So what I learned in some of my presentations is that officers have specific verbiage that they use and things that they were trained to do that are not common to, let's say, civilians, based on the fact that we are presented with split-second decisions and ever-changing environments. So this presentation is called Interacting and De-Escalating Individuals with Special Needs. I specifically made it for law enforcement officers and kind of got together with Dr. Gentili. We discuss a little bit of the epidemiology and definitions first to the officers, but we don't spend too much time on all of this because officers have a lot to learn, and they don't necessarily come to training for academic resources. They want to know, what can I take here that will help me save other people or add to my tool belt for future use? So we talk a little bit about how individuals with disabilities are diagnosed or presented, and oftentimes officers are dealing with the mild to moderate because there are more percentage of these individuals that have adaptable functionality that you'll see, whether it's in grocery stores or they're working, they have homes in neighborhoods, or maybe in colleges, they have programs for people with developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities. So due to the high percentages and the fact that these individuals have a lot of adaptability, and personal freedom, officers may likely come in contact with them in this environment. So first, we want to try to help the officers identify individuals with disabilities. So we often have easy ones, right? Physical disabilities. Some people are having sensory impairment, which is a little more difficult to see on the surface. Behavioral and emotional disruptions and developmental delays. This is something like autism or Down syndrome. So when officers are dealing with these populations, we often already know about how to deal with the other three, but the developmental delays or the intellectual disabilities, we don't often get a lot of training on this specifically. So this could be, you may come encounter with these, whether you're in community policing, volunteering, whether you're having a cooperative or friendly encounter, but these are interactions that don't involve chaos. So that's what we're talking about today. So when an individual has chaos involved, it makes the encounter different. So we discuss a little bit about the causes, which we, again, hit briefly. And then we talk about humanizing individuals with disabilities, because oftentimes we're using dated words that can be harmful. These individuals are very intelligent and they can hear everything we're saying, and they want to be heard and seen as average, you, me, and the next. So retarded is one that I try to mention to people that we say very casually, but it can hurt feelings, but also it can alienate you from your interaction. So calling someone invalid or crazy or brain damaged, having a birth defect, these are all pretty harmful to an individual who now you're trying to help. And if they've heard you say this word before, you're going to lose some potential relationship with them in that moment. So some people like to also, we're not going to say somebody is autistic. You can say somebody that as a person with autism, if, again, we want to ask questions, this could be something they don't want to be identified as well. So I use words in this presentation such as neurotypical or versus normal. Most people would say that my brother who has Downs is not normal, or maybe they say to have a normal child. It's important to remember that they're just neurotypical. You, me, and the next, we're neurotypical. We're kind of what's going around, more majority, we might think. So that's the word I may use for people without intellectual disability. And remembering yourself when you're using these terms, I try to tell officers, try to use a word that will humanize individuals instead of alienating them from your interaction. And oftentimes these individuals will have mental illness or another depression, anxiety, but it's not that they are mentally ill. They just have concurring, just like all of us, depression, anxiety, and other mental illnesses or other developmental disabilities. So when the way these people interact with law enforcement or law enforcement interacts with them, some people might say, like, I've heard this before, why are these people even out around doing this, causing trouble if they don't know their bus route, why are they out? You know, as if they should be institutionalized or something. And when my brother was born 30 years ago, that's what was happening. That's what you see here in Willowbrook Institution. So officers come in touch with these people through group homes, all levels of schooling. Some of our homeless populations are low-income populations. They're going to have people with disabilities, whether they're diagnosed or underdiagnosed. They're working at places that we frequent, right? We go to get a coffee, we go to get food. These folks are cleaning our table, they're packing our bags. Some of them are doing the register. It just depends on their level of adaptability. And most often, we come in contact with these individuals because they live with aging parents. I see this with my brother. My parents are 75 and my brother is 35. So he's living with them, and when something happens to them, he has a routine already ingrained with them. So if you take that away from him, we don't always know how he'll act. And sometimes that could be aggressive. Now, how do they know us? I know that a lot of these individuals, especially if they're living at home with their parents or don't get out as much due to their adaptability, they're seeing us in movies, TVs, video games, media. And they may have personal interactions with us, but what you see here on the photo on the right, that's what they see of us. So when we come around, it's lights, sirens, guns, fighting, any type of those things. So even if they love cops, which is very common, they might see us when we show up like this, right? Like the guns are pointing. Plus, you have to understand they may be watching media or hearing people talk about things in the media, people getting shot. So they may be afraid in that moment when they come to us. So it's necessary to engage with these individuals when we're not in crisis. Get them to know you, get the name, let them, if they want to touch your badge, let them touch your badge, you know, or if they want to stare at your gun when it's not a crisis, let them do it, you know, give them a conversation, talk to them. That's the best time to get an interaction with individuals because you have a friendly environment, no chaos. So I try to help the officers recognize the signs. So something like, again, I'll bring my brother up, Down syndrome has physical features that will let you know they have it. But there's other things if someone is utilized, someone has a speech impediment, or if their behaviors or mannerisms are kind of, maybe they're flapping their hands, or maybe they're kind of staring around. You can tell that it's different from a neurotypical person. Officers are very good at behavioral analysis. And when we come to a situation, we are able to make very quick decisions based on the stimulus that we're given. But sometimes the stimulus is a little bit off, right? It's kind of like a stim behavior. So self-stimulating behaviors, rocking, flapping, pacing, or flicking. These are individuals with autism or even any developmental disability. They use these to cope with stress, anxiety, or if they're excited, or even if they feel, it makes them feel more comfortable and they're self-regulating. My brother likes to twist his fingers a lot, make fists. Even though he's not trying to hurt you when he's angry, he makes a fist, puts them on the side of his body. So when they're in sensory overload, they're utilizing these hand movements, eye movements, maybe they're moving around, and this is helping them calm down. Now, when you see this fist, or if you see some of these stim behaviors, if there are any officers in the room or in this Zoom chat, you may already know what I'm saying. There's something that officers are taught in the academy called pre-attack indicators. So these pre-attack indicators look a lot like stimming. When someone's trying to hurt officers, in a very split second, officers can tell, right? Maybe their eyes are darting, maybe they're staring at our gun, maybe they're kind of flanking their body so that they can run. They might be looking around to see an exit, scanning. You know, they might be targeting on your gun because they're going to come after that next, or they might know where yours is so they can reach for it. So remembering when we come up to officers, when they see the flapping of the hands or the darting of the eyes, or maybe a person with autism is staring at their shiny badge, they might take it, if it's a calm situation, they can take it as just somebody being curious. But now if we've added someone's aging mother is being put in a ambulance, and now we have a kid who looks neurotypical, but he's starting to pull his hair a little bit and pacing around, and now he's staring at you because you took his mom. Now we have a situation where we have a crisis, and on top of that, he may not want to be touched because that's another issue. They don't want to be touched. They don't want you in their space. So the difference, we have to recognize those, but now we want to notice how can we differentiate between the threatening ones versus the stimming behaviors. Sometimes it's a matter of coordination, the location, the time, situation, level of offense, right? So if this person is flanking, but there's really no, they're not flanking to go anywhere. They're just kind of moving their body around. We can try to, if we can recognize it early, then we can recognize this is a stim behavior. And I know this may be difficult. It's not going to work 100% of the time. Sometimes the slowed speech might not mean that they're drunk. It might mean that they're trying to develop something to say because they're adapting to the situation differently. So they're using something different because now they're in stress. The other thing is if somebody's holding a gun, this might be a very difficult situation. They're holding a gun or a knife or a weapon. How are they holding it? And what exactly are they doing with it? Because officers will see the gun and they see danger, but if you're holding it by, let's say, the muzzle where the bullet comes out, there's a little less danger in that because they're not as close to the trigger. So this is where we have to use what we have learned about people with disabilities and move forward. So at this point, we've recognized these things if we can get these behaviors, and we want to slow down. And by slowing down, it's 10 to 15 seconds. It could be 20 for someone to make their next move. So for an officer, 10 seconds, even 15 seconds, this is a lifetime. So we're always looking for more time for these split-second decisions. And when we can identify an individual with disabilities based on their actions, behaviors, maybe their features on their face, now we have to act towards that. So can we neutralize the environment? If we now recognize this threat is a person with disabilities and the threat is still active, how can we neutralize? Can we bring down some of the sensory overload? So we ask officers, can you turn down your radio? Do we have another officer? So you can't ask an officer to turn his radio off. That's his form of communication. But do we have a partner? Can we ask the partner to listen to radio traffic and the other partner to take his radio off or turn it off? Are you able to turn off at least, I know you can't turn off, they're called wigwags, those flashing lights on the car. If we're in a dangerous situation, we got to keep them on. But some vehicles, you can turn off the front so it's not showing where you are. Maybe you can keep the back ones on. And sirens, is there a way to turn them down? Can we get less people in the room? You want to try to use calm, melodic tone. I know, again, if there's a gun involved, if there's a wrestle, if we just fought or something, there's going to be some hectic features everywhere. So can we calm down? Can we all take a deep breath? If we know what's happening, again, let's use that 10 seconds. We're going to have to bring this individual back into reality, right? So when we talk about Ethan Saylor in the movie, you know, he wanted to buy the movie. He wanted to go in the movie without paying. Well, he's 26 years old and he probably understands enough about money that you got to pay to get into somewhere. So we may be delaying the other moviegoers. Is this a risk we're willing to take? To kind of explain to him, do you understand that you have to pay to get in here? Do you know that you didn't pay? And then, maybe bring his aide in and talk to him about that. Doing our best not to use cliches. Officers are pretty good at using cliches. And this is difficult because we got to stay in reality and be very clear. And we got to be flexible and negotiate. With somebody like Ethan, okay, what are we going to do? Do we let him go in and get the free movie? Is this one of those passes? I don't know. We got to talk to the manager about that. Ethan's 26 years old. He's got it. There are consequences to committing crime. So what can we say to him? How can we negotiate that out? Are we able to use the aid? And then what kind of consequences and punishment are available to someone with his level of adaptability? I talk about my brother. If my brother committed a terrible crime, if he committed a murder, he has to go to jail or somewhere, but he can't go to regular jail, right? He wouldn't make it. And it wouldn't be appropriate for his level of adaptability. So, and always remembering, although nobody wants to be touched probably by a police officer, remembering that if you touch somebody that has a problem with touch, it's going to make it more volatile. As with most officers know, sometimes you touch them and they automatically tense up. This person might be more volatile. A story I remember from one of the calls I went on is we had a call for an individual with Down syndrome. Well, we didn't know she had Down syndrome at the time, but it was on a college campus in a dorm. When we arrived, she was a medical call and she thought she was having a heart attack or something's wrong with her heart. So when we arrived, my partner arrived first. He's a male. He has a deep voice. And then I arrived after. She's still wearing her CPAP machine because she was worried it was some breathing problem. I recognized immediately she had Downs, but my partner didn't. The mask was covering her face, but I could tell by her fingers and her toes, they're kind of shaped a little different. And additionally, there were some other things happening. He didn't initially recognize it, but once we did, we had her take the mask off if she felt comfortable, and then we kind of talked. I could tell she was uncomfortable because she kept pulling up her tank top, kept falling over her shoulder, kind of exposing her shoulder. So I kind of asked my partner to step back because he's a male, and I thought maybe it's a female thing. We talked a little bit longer, and she explained she ate a lot of fried food and had some beer before, a couple hours before, and she was having some heartburn, but we didn't know that at the time. So when the fire department came, they asked her some questions, and she simply just answered everything the way they wanted. And so she had told them she had several beers and that she had never drank before. And so I had to ask her again, can you clarify that? Remember what you told me? And she says, I don't remember. I said, remember when you ate, you told me you had mozzarella sticks and you had this. Do you remember what you drank? And she said, yeah, I had a beer. And I said, how many? And she said, oh, I just had one today. I said, well, you told them 3. She said, I had 3 on my birthday, and that wasn't today. So something about some individuals will answer a pleasing answer because they want to adapt to the situation and get out of trouble. So if you say, what are you doing? And they just say, I don't know. They won't be able to answer it if you don't give them. Again, now we're going to talk about the 10 seconds on the other side. We got to give them 10 seconds to answer. And then we got to maybe bring them back to reality. So go back to the beginning of the day, talk them through, bring context clues. And then you want to keep the questions open. They are very willing to answer the way, they're very good at your behavior and your signs that you're giving them. And they've lived in this world long enough to be treated the way they've been treated, to know how to answer adults or people of authority the way that they want. So she was just answering to get out of the trouble. She had a lot of men in her room and a lot of badges in her room, and she was a little bit nervous. So again, giving necessary time for responses is very, very helpful, and you'll find you'll get better answers and it's more clear. So speaking naturally, trying not to change your tone too much, and being prepared to take a lot more time. Again, once you recognize all these things, the time is going to be very important. And I say it again and again and again because officers know that in these heated situations, there is no time. So there's never time, and you've already made the mistake of putting your hands on somebody and things have blown up already. So repeating helps to them as well. So these are some more interview tips that Dr. Gentili puts together because she does psychiatric work with individuals with disabilities. So again, staying away from something like spread eagle, right? Like do your legs spread eagle. They're not going to know what that means. So let's talk them through what we want them to do specifically, one at a time. And then we're using gestures and doing that slowly, and then respecting personal space. So this is if you have them in jail, you want to segregate them from a prison population. And each time repeating, you can repeat questions from a slightly different perspective to help them understand what you're asking of them. And these are just some more questions that we might use when we are interviewing folks. So we've talked about how to identify and how to stay safe and stay away from people, but it's not always possible not to touch people. Sometimes someone is being very dangerous. Like I said, they could have a gun, they could have a knife, and they could be hurting other people. So at this point, and the officers in the movie theater, they weren't wrong in putting their hands on Ethan, right? They weren't wrong in doing what they did. So the advantage is, if we have identified, now Ethan has Down, so it was on his face, he could see it. If we can identify early, then we have a chance to de-escalate while we're interacting with them. So if it is unsafe, we have to act. So when we do act, I don't know if I can get through here. When you do act and there is no time, we have to keep all the safety measures involved. So something like individuals that have like a really big belly and they're really short and stout, we want to be careful putting those people on their belly. And if we do, we got to flip them over quick. We want to give clear and brief descriptions. You are now taking, again, somebody's safety and freedom. And I don't know that they've ever been in this position where somebody has been this aggressive with them before. And it's okay if we've misinterpreted the situation, didn't know they had a disability, but now you're laying on top of them and they're screaming for their mom. So now what do? So you want to continue the conversation and keep talking to them. Be brief, telling them like, I need you to calm down, or use their first name. Give me your right hand, or give me your left hand, or we got to calm down, keep breathing. You want to keep checking their breathing. Sometimes an individual will be so worked up, they will just stop their own breathing, their own heart. Okay. And so we don't want to have extreme pressure. And I know these all seem very obvious, but when you're in a heated moment, sometimes it doesn't work that way. So we got to remember to check our partners, or you want to check yourself. Our knees are not going to be on the back by the ribs, not on the shoulders, not on the neck, those kind of things, because you can get tossed up and you have to be careful. So when it's calm, we need to debrief. We need to sit up people. We need to talk to them. We need to regain that relationship for safety with officers. It's necessary that we don't lose this interaction just because a mistake was made or an interaction had to go physical. So the individual is processing this incident much slower than us, and their reaction time is going to be slower. So the skill will be lower. And that's why before we get into these physical interactions, we got to remember, like, how are they holding the weapon? Is it even a threat? So this is, hopefully we won't have to touch them. So when this happens, you want to take a deep breath and take cover. Is there a way we can clear the area? Is there a way we can call for backup? Is there a way we can keep everyone else safe while we maintain contact with the one person that is causing trouble? And lastly, the only way that this has, like me as an officer, I go into work and I talk about it. I bring my brother around. In all these interactions, officers are asked to be an expert in all things. So how can they be an expert in people with developmental disabilities if they don't know how they act? So I bring my brother to work, or I invite them to, I coach basketball for Special Olympics, or I invite them into these environments where you can meet individuals and listen to how they talk. My Down's kids have a larger tongue. It makes them have a stutter or a speech impediment. So they need more time to talk, and you have to translate what they're saying. Or you have to be creative and get a notebook if they're good at writing. Or you have to ask more questions that are yes and no. And that's fairly hard, so you have to be a little more creative so that they can talk to you in a way that you can understand and translate, so that when you're under pressure, you can understand how to deal with individuals you've dealt with before. So we always ask officers to engage, stop and talk to community members. You know where they're at because you've dealt with them. Officers know the folks that are neurotypical but kind of keep hanging around. I had a guy who was asking for quarters from individuals at a coffee shop. And I knew him, so I went to the store. I said, "What are you doing, man?" He said, "I just needed some money." I said, let me see your wallet. And he pulled his wallet. He had lots of money, lots of cash bills. And I said, "Why are you asking for?" He's, "I like quarters. I just want quarters." So he wasn't panhandling. He doesn't look like he has a disability, but he was scaring people because he was asking for quarters in a coffee shop. So I called his sister and just let him know what he was doing. And we kind of had a conversation, and he understood because we all talked together, and I used the resource of his sister. So plan meetings to introduce yourself and other officers to the intellectual disability population, and give them time to ask you questions, or hug you, or touch your badge, or stare at your gun, or look at your cruiser. I mean, you don't know what they see on TV all day, so they could be easily enthralled every time they see you and scared to death every time they see your lights. So every interaction is very helpful. I bring my brother to these presentations when I go to law enforcement departments. I have them talk to my brother. I allow them to come and show them usually they're off duty, and they have their badge or gun hidden, and I ask them to expose it to my brother, show him what does a cop look like when they're not a cop. And although as much as I bring my brother to help the officers, it is to help my brother and other individuals on my basketball team I bring, because I know that when they leave my site, I am not the cop that's dealing with them. So it's very necessary that I help them understand how to talk to officers, even if it's not me. One of my individuals, he cannot speak like you and I. And when he's real scared, he can't do much. He can't do anything with his hands because no one can read his sign language. So he's very good at texting, and he's very good at writing. So I've asked him, if you ever get in trouble and your mom's ever hurt, I need you to tell the officer to text you or talk on your phone. So each time I teach them a little bit more. And also researching your jurisdiction. Where is your county board of DD? If you're really interested in this, go and find them. Where's the residential homes? Where are the schools that support ID population? bring them, or like we bring this presentation to whomever, get our contact information. We'll do Zoom wherever you need to go. But if you find the County Board of DD, they can tell you where everything is. They can tell you the resources. When you come up on an individual that's with an aging parent, what can we do if something happens to the parent? Where does this person's resources come from? Residential homes, we've got young kids with behavior issues. Go there, find out what it is that makes them upset and how can you interact with them. And then something like I do is explaining to your coworkers what you learned at this training. Or like you can go, if you're not an officer, go to your local police departments or university police departments. And if you like what we're presenting, we would be happy to come and talk, because each time we expose one new person, even if there's 50 people in this room, only one person does anything with this training, that will save many lives in the future, especially individuals with disabilities. And it'll save an officer who makes a bad mistake, right? But if anybody has any questions, I can answer those now.
Hi, my name is Cindy. I am the grandma of a young man, 12 years old, going on 13, with severe nonverbal autism. I'm a social worker. My daughter, her husband, and my grandson do not live near me. Probably a day does not go by where I don't think about his safety. Because he's nonverbal. But at this point, unless you look closely, at least at this point, he looks neurotypical, though it's changing a little with adolescence. But I worry if he would not respond to a command like stop, the kinds of commands we've come to understand are common. So I wonder if you could talk about this.
Yeah, I actually think I might have heard a call go out like this recently. As much as he gets older, I hope that someday some type of, he can learn some type of empowerment and advocate for himself. But at this point, especially when he has an issue, let's say at school or on the bus or something, where he begins to act out and he doesn't know what to do because he's nonverbal. Maybe he has a migraine, for all we know. I mean, we all know what that feels like, and you can't do anything if you can't talk to anybody. It is on the officers to understand the resources that are available to them and then help appropriately to your nephew. So sometimes officers want it to be quick and easy, and generally when we're working with neurotypical individuals that kind of adapt with us, we say do it, they do it. If they don't do it, we have ways to kind of like restrain or something, and then it kind of goes normal. But the thing, just like with Ethan and even my brother, it's necessary that officers have exposure like this. So I believe it's up to the officer to learn a little bit more. And I think the police departments, as we learn more things, we have to invite people to kind of help us, or go into our community and find these individuals. There are programs, I know there are programs in schools that help individuals advocate for themselves. Doing your best to socialize your nephew, or have your daughter and son do it. Socializing and getting him involved as much as possible with other individuals like him or sort of on his level. So my brother has played basketball for a long time, and he has really come out of his shell. He's been able to communicate differently because he's hanging out with his friends, and he's going all different places with them. So he's able to expose himself then to the community. Something that wouldn't be helpful would be only keeping him home. I know it's scary, but there are so many resources, and I don't know what area you're in, but you can always send that to me and I can look out for it. But finding the resources for him to kind of get him the closest adaptability so that when he is, if he ever is on his own, he reaches halfway. And then I really hope that officers are getting the kind of training where they can understand and meet him the other way. So now we're at a minimal amount of like physical touch if possible, I noticed in one call, they're bringing more officers. We'll get the supervisor, do this. He was being aggressive, and what did they say? He hit his handler. And I was like, first of all, it's not a handler. He's not an animal. it is an aide. He's an aide or a guardian or something. And if he's hitting the aide, that's fine. The aide will know what to do with that, but let's involve the aide, you know? So whoever is advocating for your nephew or your grandson, it's necessary that you have them, they want to be a part of the interactions. So keep them close to him. And it may be that he has an aide his whole life and this person advocates with him and for him. So we actually I present at CAT conference in Portage County this year. I think it was Portage County this year. And I brought my brother along with me. He's 35 or 34 and he has Down syndrome. And then I coach a basketball team. For the past 20 years I've been playing with them, but in the past 2 years I became the coach because our coach is retired. And the individuals, like I said, I bring up for their benefit, but also for the officers, because oftentimes, again, officers are either voluntold to go to this training. Some don't want to be there. And it's not that there's something wrong with the officers. They're being asked to do a lot and then they're working a million hours. So sometimes when they go to these trainings, they really just want to bring back tools that will help them. And occasionally the meetings end up being very academic and sometimes officers feel like they're being asked a lot that they don't think they're able to do. So like I said, I took this as a note that I had something to offer, that I could offer it as an officer to other officers and then bring my brother. So when I bring my brother, he'll discuss with them and he's nervous. He never knows what we're doing. So what's really helpful is that he will speak at his own pace and answer questions the way he wants to. And then I show the officers how I actually talk with him and how to get better answers out of him. And then with my other individual that I bring, he's nonverbal. So we go over 10 signs for officers that are necessary. Like if you're under arrest or are you hard of hearing? Let me see your license and registration, stop. Different things that you can use, just 10 signs, because officers don't need to learn complete sign language. They can start with 10 signs like stop, or are you hard of hearing? Do you need an interpreter? And then go from there. So as with him, I tell him, and a lot of people hard of hearing know, get a piece of paper, get a pencil, right? I try to tell officers, if you handcuff him, you've taken away his voice and his freedom. So now we have to decide, can we handcuff him in the front? That's kind of a safety issue. So do we do it if he's being compliant? And we got to remember how to be flexible. So we don't want to keep our ego too high. And as we find out somebody is doing something and we need to break our ego down and go with their abilities, that's sometimes hard for officers to do. So we try to remember what our job is, what our role is, why are we there? What did this person do? Why are we talking to them? And is there a way we can are they yelling at me, but can I leave because they're not doing anything illegal anymore? So that's something we kind of bring into it, is just remembering our role, why we're there, and then how to keep everybody safe. So I just hoped to bring something. I know a lot of people, I don't know if anybody in here is a law enforcement officer, so I didn't want to put you through the full training because a lot of it wouldn't mean as much to you. But we hope that if you hear something you like, and we can at least pass this information to other law enforcement agencies in your area. Dr. Gentili is in Wright State University, so we're kind of everywhere and we can go where it's needed.
And Officer Dudziak, thank you so much for taking time out today and for your presentation. If you want to, you can hang on for a little bit. I think it ends at 3:45, but in case people have other questions, we can kind of hang out.
Yeah, I don't mind staying. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone. I know we're not in person and it kind of goes a little differently when I can bring the guest speakers. But I really appreciate everyone listening because it is so very important. I know I'm a little selfish because it's about my brother, but also my team that I love. But it's some really simple things that we can do.
I have a question. I didn't want to inject it earlier. I felt it might be too off topic.
Okay.
My oldest triplet is interested in being a mounted police officer, and she has some experience in sign language and so forth. Do you see any difference in the approach that such a police officer might have as far as addressing concerns that you were discussing?
What I find is that, well, for me personally, the experience I've had with my brother and the individuals I work with, I've been doing it since I was a kid because he's a couple years younger than me, is that, I mean, I have almost no use of force in my 5 years working. But I also find that I'm getting a better interaction with individuals. So I'm building relationships all day with these cultures that I'm aware of. So like my brother's disability and some other places that I'm aware of. What I'm finding is not only do I bring that back to my other officers, but I'm having less use of force. I'm bringing in a relationship where now I invite these individuals to the police department. Some of the students that I've met at the university that have this program, I've let them, they're very high functioning. And so I've given them ride-alongs, and they may never be police officers, but they could be, there's jobs for individuals in the police department that have nothing to do with being an officer. So they could be filing, they could be answering phones, depending on their level of adaptability. I find that it is very helpful as overall as an officer. It makes me a better officer, able to talk to even individuals from different countries, because you now know that communication isn't just I talk, you talk. If you look at me and shake your head, I shake my head. That's not how it goes with individuals with adaptability problems. They're not even gonna look at you sometimes when you're talking. They're not gonna understand what you're saying, but they know what you're saying. So I'm not sure if I answered that question. I know it's very necessary that someone like her would be having the authority and then the communication and the relationship with other officers, so that she would be spreading this information.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when you learn sign language, I only know a little bit, but when you learn sign language and you know how to communicate with people, again, this is going to make your ability to communicate with all types of people in crisis much more fluent, because you're learning skills of how people react to what you're saying, and then you know where to go from there.
Sure. And it brings to mind that I've worked with students in the spectrum of autism and multiple different types of disabilities. And there are many times when an individual will not respond, mm-hmm. because in their mind's eye, there is no response needed. Mm-hmm. They're either in agreement and they choose not to respond. But right. This could be interpreted as being non-compliant.
Yeah, not replying or defiant. Because sometimes, again, when we talk about ego in officers, you go in, you give it a response or you give a command, and you expect something in return. You expect cooperation or like being defiant, but you don't expect silence. And
right.
So that's what I mean. This thing where you can identify an individual with disabilities when you don't get the response you're expecting on the high or the low, and you get somebody silent, and then you just keep yelling at them, do it, do it, do it. And they're like, just staring at you. The first question should be, are they hard of hearing? Like, do they even hear me? Where are their eyes? Now, you want to force everybody to look at your eyes, because not everybody wants to look right at your eyes, but can you give them like, hey, what's going on down there? Like, look at their eyes. That's enough connection for some people, And then if they're not listening to you, maybe again, like you said, they've decided I'm not answering that because it doesn't warrant a reaction from me. So it can be all of many things. My brother gets silent because sometimes he doesn't know how to answer, and he's translating it in his head a lot. And then finally he just says nothing. And you're like, Jeff, did you forget the question? And he's like, no. Okay, well, answer it. And he's like, I don't know. And that's it. That's what we get. So it takes time. And somebody, like I said, somebody that knows about sign language will know that sometimes people that are speaking another language are translating in their head while we're talking to them. So all those things will be helpful. Learning a different trait like that is always helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.